I like the scene where it shows or it reenacts it, where they're like at that MR2 and they pull out in the desert and do a bunch of donuts and then step out with an Uzi and start shooting shit.
Yeah,
And I was
it
like,
was.
okay, I could see myself doing that. Like, I could probably see myself having an MR2 and pulling up in an Uzi and just like randomly shooting shit.
Yeah, yeah, that was pretty funny. It made me think of that movie. I can't remember what it was called. Did you ever see that movie? It had Jonah Hill in it, where they were basically became arms dealers.
Oh yeah, yeah. With Nick Cage, right?
With who?
Didn't have Nicolas Cage in it?
No, that was another one called like God of
Oh,
War
okay.
or something like that. This one had Jonah Hill and somebody else, and they were two young guys. And I think it was like back in the 90s, they basically started selling illegal arms.
I haven't seen that. I saw like the real interview with the real dude, but I don't think I've seen them because I think that's based on a real thing.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It made me kind of think of that movie. You should watch that movie if you haven't seen it. It's worth watching.
Okay.
Um,
No.
I'm sure it's sensationalized a little bit for the movie, but I thought it was I thought it was decent.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's a pretty fascinating story. And that dude was smart, man, to be able to forge those documents the way that he did.
Well, and I would from the beginning because they're the way they they do the video. They want to make it more mysterious, obviously, to increase interest and whatever. Like they don't come out right out and tell you at the beginning that he's a forger. But like as soon as like he came up with like that oath of the freeman thing, I was like, that sounds highly suspect. I got to wonder if this is a forgery and if this guy's a forger because
Yeah,
I was
same.
like, he's just too lucky to like be finding all this shit.
Well, I didn't immediately connect it when I started watching this documentary, but like I said, back when I read up on the Mormon church, because I had a couple of friends that were Mormon,
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading about this case, um, but I didn't remember enough to connect the dots at first when I was watching it. And it really wasn't until they said something about the salamander letter, and I was like, "Man, that sounds really familiar," but I don't know, it wasn't all clicking until like at the end. But
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, he was clearly smarter than your average bear. I mean, if you think about
Yeah.
1984 and or the early 80s when he was forging these documents, and he was obviously it showed how he was getting the paper from that era. He was just stealing it out of books and bookstores.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but to figure out the recipe to forge like this iron-based ink
Mm-hmm.
and then pulling it through the paper in a
With the
way
vacuum
that
cleaner. Yeah.
yeah, that would fool not only documents experts but like the testing that they did, like the molecular bombardment testing
Mm-hmm.
to determine the age. Um, that's I mean, I gotta give it to him. I mean, he's good.
Yeah.
Like, and he kind of said in his interviews, like, "Oh well, I wasn't really that good. They just talked me up because if they say an amateur beat them, then it makes them look bad."
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. I think he's being.
He had
I
made a
think he's
life
kind of
study of that shit. I think for
yes,
sure. And like
yeah. He
practicing, passing a lie detector test when he was in his teen years, just in case he ever had to take a lie detector test. I was like, holy shit, dude, that's playing the long game.
yeah yeah. I was curious how he did that. Still though, they said something that had to do with like his biofeedback through his skin, but I don't know
Yeah,
how the
and
fuck do
I've
you.
heard, I've heard before that there are ways to to beat a lie detector test, and there's some question as to whether lie detectors even work, but I've never really looked into it too deeply.
Yeah, same.
Um,
It was a good documentary though.
well, and
I,
I'll tell you the conspiracy theory that I kind of came up with afterwards, which there's really no evidence for, and it's purely a conspiracy theory on my part. I was like, those letters that he presented, like this could all be like an elaborate effort by the Mormon church to like discredit this dude. And, you know, maybe the letters really were real and, they set him up somehow or, threatened his family or whatever. And, so he just, in the end, was willing to confess and take a fall on all of this. But
yeah,
and obviously, and I have no evidence of that. And I'm assuming, if I was writing fiction, I would write that backstory into it. but I'm sure in real life it's just like they said, which is he's just he's a good forger and con man. But
Yeah, he definitely was a psychopath. I mean, to sit there and just the way he played off nearly blowing his own self up. I mean,
yeah, and I wasn't clear, like, and I don't think anybody's clear on what his motives were there. Like, was he like because they say, well, was he going to murder someone else, or and he accidentally blew himself up, or did he do it on purpose, or
yeah,
what's going on there?
I tend to think he probably accidentally blew himself up when he was trying to deliver that to somebody else, but
Yeah,
he doesn't want to admit it.
and well, yeah, he wouldn't want to admit it because he could probably get another charge for attempted murder, but but
Yeah,
and it sounded like he was just going to blow up the people that were going to expose him. I guess that was kind of his ultimate motive. Is he was just he's like, well, I'll just blow them up, and they won't be able to expose me, and that'll be that. And so I'm assuming that was kind of his game plan there.
yeah, and I guess people that were, I guess he had overpromised on that McClellan hoard. He had promised all
Yeah,
these documents, and then he couldn't churn them out fast enough,
yeah,
and so yeah, it sounded like he just decided to kill his investors so they would quit hounding him. And that Christensen guy, I don't know, they kept saying that he was afraid he was going to get exposed. And watching that documentary, it's like you said, like, how can you look at this and not think he was a forger? Like, no one guy finds all this shit.
yeah. I think if he had stuck, if he'd kind of like not gotten overly bold, and he'd stuck to forging documents that the church is fully going to accept, like I think he could have made a career out of that. Like I
Yeah,
think he could have just made a career of churning out fake Mormon documents that paint the Mormon church in a good light, and
yeah,
no one would have ever questioned that because they wouldn't want to question it. And like the only people who really care are the Mormon church and the Mormons in Utah. Um, and so I don't think he would ever have been exposed.
no, no, I don't think so either. But his desire to damage the church and the knowledge that he could profit more off of damaging documents, I guess it was
That's
just too much.
I guess, and I'm just like, I don't know, like it's weird to me because like I said, it's like he's closeted. Like he could have just walked away from this in his early teens, the whole thing, and like gone out and quit Mormonism entirely, and moved to another state, and it would have basically, I guess, ostracized him from his family and everything. But I
Yeah,
mean, and I guess he didn't want to do that. I guess he still wanted to be part. I guess he still wanted to be a part of his family and the community around him, but at the same time, he just didn't believe any of it. So
yeah, it's almost like he had this like passive aggressive.
yeah, it's passive aggressive. I think is a good way to
Yeah,
put it. Yeah, and like his wife said one time he tried to he was like, oh, that was a forgery. I made that up. And she was like, what? And he was like, no, I'm just kidding. I didn't forge it. It's like he wanted to tell someone that he was like getting away with all this shit, I think.
yeah, yeah. It would be hard to get away with all of that and be that good at it and nobody know. Like, you'd want somebody to know how good you were.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely his part of his downfall, I think, is he wanted people to know that he was smarter than them.
Yeah. It was pretty fascinating though. I
Yeah.
gotta say, I was hooked. I watched the whole thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I gotta start over.
I don't know why that's backwards. It's really weird.
Ah, shit. All right.
We'll get better at this as we go, I guess. And
What's going into the sausage here?
there's definitely some reflection off my head. Yeah, I may end up in federal prison.